Today, we are wrapping up our series, The Benefits of Being Stuck. There's times in life, where you're stuck in a job you hate. Maybe you're stuck waiting in a situation, and being patient is challenging. Being patient is hard. And in the middle of our stuckness, in the middle of our challenges, God's still moving. God's still working. He's still working his plan out for us. And so we'll wrap that up today. And the title of the message today is In the Middle. In the middle, because every one of us at some way, some place and time is in the middle of something. I remember when Ezra was a kid, he is a kid, but when he was a baby, I should say, there was some help that was needed during cold season. Those little ball sucker things that you would squeeze in and suck the snot out of a child's nose as they're like an infant, right? Some of you are like, yeah, I hated those things. Others of you are like, oh, that was my favorite part of having kids. Well, for those of you, I'm not going to tell which part I was, but we had the ball thing didn't work for Ezra when he was a kid, and so we had to get this tool that our doctor recommended called a nose Frida. So basically, it was like this syringe-looking thing that you kind of put up in the nose of the baby or child, and there was a filter at the end of it, and then there was a hose that came out of it, and so you stuck the filter in the child's nose, and you put the other end of it in your mouth, and you would... You didn't slurp the snot. You didn't slurp the snot up. That's why I said there's a filter. It was the air, the suction, that you just pulled all the good stuff, out of the nose of the babies. And, Ezra's reaction was like many of you. He hated that thing. It was like taking bacon and waving it in the face of a vegetarian when we pulled that thing out. Like there was lots of pain involved in it. And so it actually would take both Audrey and I one of us would pin his arms down. The other one did the sucking with the nose Frida to get everything out. There was a process that he had to go through of pain, unfortunately, to get to the deliverance of being able to breathe through his nose. And life can sometimes be like that. A little bit messy, a little bit sloppy, and a little bit painful, all at the same time. And yet, in life, we've got pain, we've got challenges, we've got trials. And the pain, it hurts. At times, it feels like we're stuck. And when we're stuck, we get overwhelmed. And we feel like we're bound up. There's nothing we can do. And see, we have to go through the process of pain to reveal the promise of deliverance. We have to go through this process of pain in order to reveal this promise that God has for each of us in deliverance. Sometimes we deal with pain because we have to. Other times we deal with pain because we know that there's something on the back end of it. We know that if we just go through this, we will get to something else on the other end of it. That's similar to the nation of Israel. You see, the nation of Israel was God's chosen people, and they had been living in a land that wasn't theirs. They lived in a land called Egypt for over 400 years, and many of those, they lived as slaves to the Egyptian people. And there was a point where they were stuck, and they were beginning to change things out. They felt the pain of slavery. They felt the pain of the beatings, the hard work, the constant struggle. But it was all part of the process that God was using to reveal his plan of deliverance for his chosen people, the Israelites. The Israelites were trapped in the middle, and God was bringing them out of this situation in Egypt and bringing them into something greater. But there was a trial that they faced. They left Egypt, and they got to the edge of what's called the Red Sea, and they felt stuck. But they weren't stuck. They were stopped. They got to the edge of the Red Sea, and the Egyptian army was bearing down on them. We see in Exodus chapter 14, it says, as Pharaoh approached, The people of Israel looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them. You can go read about this part of the story in Exodus chapters 7 through 12 that talk about the deliverance that God had done, the miracles he performed while his people were living in Egypt. And so they ended up getting out of the slavery. Pharaoh, who was the ruler of Egypt, said, "Go ahead and go." And then realizes, "Oh my goodness, all of my labor force is now gone. We need them all back." And so he sends them out. Then he realizes that, and he sends his army chasing after them. And then it says they cried out, the Israelites cried out, and they said to Moses, "Why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? We said, 'Leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness.'" They're standing here. The Red Sea is right in front of them, a barrier. They turn around, and the Egyptian army is coming after them, and they feel stuck. They're in the middle. They're in the middle of the Red Sea, and they're in the middle of the Egyptian army, and they want to be on the other side of it. They're not where they want to be. They want to be on the other part of the Red Sea. They don't want to be, at times they said they want to be back in Egypt. They don't know where they want to be, if we're really honest. They're messed up. They don't understand. But they know that they're not where they want to be at. They want to be free, comfortable. But right now, they're in the middle of something. They're in the middle of pain. Maybe you're not where you want to be. Maybe you're not where you want to be right now. You want to be more financially stable. You want a better job. You want to be a better dad, wife, mom, employee. You want to be over the depression. You want to be done with the fear. You want to be done with the anxiety. Whatever it is that you feel like you're in the middle of right now, you're just knowing that you're not where you want to be. I'm not where I want to be right now. The middle for you is pain. The middle is discomfort. The middle is a storm. The middle is tumultuous. The middle is rough. The middle's not where any of us wants to be. Have you ever been stuck in the middle seat in the back of a compact car? Hey, give me a little room. What about being the middle child? There's a reason they call it a midlife crisis. The middle is average. It's not the best. It's not the worst. See, the middle is where everyone gets overlooked. And no one wants to be in the middle. The challenge is we spend most of our lives in the middle. We spend most of our lives there. Many of us aren't the best at our trade or our craft. We're not the best at something. You fill in the blank of what you're not the best at that you want to be the best at, whether it's a Pinterest mom, the best spouse. You fill that blank in. You're not the best at it. You're just in the middle. You're just average. We're not in the ground. We're not in heaven. We're in the middle. We're in the middle. And I don't know where you are or what your middle is today, but I would venture to guess you're in the middle of something. Middle of life, middle of a marital struggle, middle of the holiday season without a spouse, the middle of family drama, the middle of drama at work, drama at school, the middle of something. I don't know what you're in the middle of, but what I do know is that God is God in the middle. No matter what you're in the middle of, God is still God. Amen. And in Exodus chapter 14, verse 13, we continue. Moses answers the people after they had done their grumbling, telling them that they want to be back in Egypt. He says, "Don't be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. He says, I am your shield, in the middle of your boss accusing you. You can find that in Genesis 15:1. I am with you in the middle of your struggle in your relationships. You find that in Acts chapter 18, verse 10. I am with you to deliver you in the middle of your marital struggles. That's Jeremiah 1, verse 8. I am with you to save you in the middle of your addiction to pornography. That's Jeremiah 30, verse 11. God is with us in the middle of things. These are all things that God promises to us. But the challenge and the struggle is we don't trust his promises. We don't trust the things that he gives us. We don't trust the deliverance that he's already given to us. The people of Israel, they were just delivered from being slaves in Egypt, and here they are already lacking faith, already lacking purpose in their lives. They want to be back in slavery, or better yet, they'd rather be dead, they say, than where they currently are in the middle, living as God's chosen people on their way to a land that he has promised to them. But yet that's not what they want, because they're not where they want to be. The Israelites, they forgot their sense of purpose, and they fell to the pleasures of the flesh, the comfort of living in Egypt where they had it all. When they forgot about the things that God had done for them. When God brought them out of where they wanted to be to where they were supposed to be. But the process was hard. And if you know the story about the nation of Israel, you know that when they were there in the middle of that Red Sea and the Egyptian army bearing down on them, God did a miracle, and he parted the Red Sea, and they walked across on dry land. And after the nation of Israel, God's chosen people, had walked across on dry land, the Egyptians attempted running through there, and the walls of water came down. And they didn't see those Egyptians ever again. God had delivered his people through the Red Sea, and they made their way as they traveled along in the wilderness for nearly 2 years on their way to the promised land. And they get to the edge of the promised land, and they decide to send 12 spies in to go in and take a look of what blessings are there, what things are there in this promised land, what are they going to need to do. And so these 12 spies go into the land. They spend 40 days wandering around, figuring out what they need to do, how they need to make things work. And they get back after their 40 days, and they give this report about people living there who are powerful. They give a report of these fortified cities that are large. And Caleb, one of the 12 spies, he said this. He said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Joshua was one of the other spies. He and Caleb were aligned, and they said, hey, let's believe God is with us, even though this is a big undertaking. But there were 10 other spies who didn't agree with that train of thought. There were 10 other spies who thought differently. The other men who explored the land in Numbers 13, they disagreed. They said, we can't go up against them. They're stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report about the land among the Israelites. They said, the land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers, and that's what they thought too. They had no faith in God, who had spent the last 2 years, over 2 years, walking with them. They forgot that God had delivered them from the nation of Egypt. They forgot that God had parted the Red Sea for them. They forgot that God had brought water out of a rock in the middle of a desert. They forgot that God had provided food for them day and night and day and night. They forgot all those miracles that God had done. In this moment, their flesh, their fear took over, and they said, no, we can't do this. The process of pain is uncomfortable. But to bring deliverance, they had to go through the middle. The people of Israel weren't where they wanted to be. But they forgot. They forgot that they weren't where they used to be. They may not have been where they wanted to be, but they weren't where they used to be. There was no faith in Jehovah Jireh, which is God will provide. There was no faith in their provider. Their ancestor Abraham, who they looked up to and they cherished, had the same opportunity that they did to not believe in God in the middle of a challenging situation. And in the book Swipe Right, Levi Lusko, he says this about Abraham, or Abram. When he was given a promise of a son at an old age, he says, Abram believed God on the spot, and God accounted it to him for righteousness. In other words, he says, God opened up an umbrella called grace over Abram's life. And from that moment forward, not one drop of wrath would ever splash onto his skin. He says that's faith, by the way, triggering grace by taking God at his word. Latching on to God's words that come from his mouth, no ifs, ands, or buts. And in this ancient story, Abraham, he modeled for us what God has asked from us from the very beginning. And that's faith. He modeled faith in this moment. See, we mistakenly think that going to heaven is based on doing something. We believe, but it's actually based on believing something. It's believing in God's promises. Author and pastor Jensen Franklin, he says this. He says, you don't get good to get God. You get God to get good. You don't get good to get God, meaning you don't have to earn your way. You don't have to be a good person to get to God. He says you get God to get good. You go to Jesus and say, I'm messed up. I royally messed up, but I need your love. I need you to help me be good. See, it's not about what you do. It's about believing what God did and what God will do in your life. See, Ephesians chapter 2, it tells us that salvation is by grace through faith alone. Abram's experience became the prototype for how we're saved today by putting our faith in Jesus Christ, our trust in him. And yet, in the middle of this moment where the Israelites are at, they had zero faith. They had lost all hope. Their faith was gone. And remember the last time they were stuck in the middle. They were standing at the edge of the Red Sea, stuck in the middle. When the Egyptians were coming after them and they wanted to go back to Egypt, they wanted to go back to slavery, they wanted to go back to pain, and they did it again in Numbers chapter 14. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? They'd lost faith. Lost faith in Moses. They lost faith in the promise of God. They lost faith in God himself. What storm are you stuck in right now? What are you in the middle of right now? What are you stuck in? What is it in your life that's causing you to lack faith? What's the promise that God has given you that you're forgetting about? What are the trials? What are the pain? What are the challenges? What are the struggles that God has brought you through that you are forgetting about, that you aren't trusting in? What are the things that he's done in your life that you've forgotten? Remember when you had that heartbreak that he brought you through? Remember when you had that health crisis that he brought you through? Remember when he reconciled you to your son or your daughter or to your spouse? Remember when you fill that blank in? Remember when that thing happened and God was faithful? Remember when? How do we know if God was a healer? If we were never put in situations where we needed to be healed? How will we know if God is a provider if we never had a need to be provided for? How would we know if God was a sustainer if we were never put in a situation where we needed his strength to sustain us daily? See, I'm not where I used to be. I'm not where I used to be. When you're in the trial, you know this. It's the process you have to go through to recognize the change that he is trying to develop within you. You have to go through the process to get to where you want to be. But when you're in the middle, don't forget to look back at where you used to be. You see, the miracles are what give us the motivation to keep going forward in the middle. The things that God has done in our past, the things that He's worked out for us, the miracles in our lives in our past, they're the things that keep us going when we're in the middle of a trying situation, when we're in the middle of a challenge. The memories we have of what God has done. The Israelites were forced to wander in the wilderness for 40 years because they forgot about the promises of God. They forgot about what God had done in their lives and for their nation. The miracles they'd seen, the protection they had, the promises that were fulfilled. They're at the last step before entering into the promised land, and they are afraid. But fear can only control you if you allow it. Fear can only control you if you allow it. The thing is, if we listen to our fear long enough, we'll talk ourselves out of what God is trying to bring us into. If we listen to that voice in our heads, that fearful voice in our heads, we often will talk ourselves out of those things, those promises, those dreams that God is trying to bring us into. Don't miss an opportunity because of a lack of faith. Because maybe God isn't punishing you, but He's preparing you for something different. See, after 40 years of wandering in the desert, of preparation in the desert, the Israelites finally get to go into the promised land. And the first stop they get to on their journey into the promised land, as they begin to take it over, is a little city called Jericho. Now, if you're not familiar with Jericho, Jericho was a heavily fortified city. Walls 25 feet high, walls 20 feet thick. They get to this place, and the first place they get to as they begin to conquer this land is a fortified city. And God gives a command to Joshua. He tells Joshua, the leader of the nation of Israel, he tells him what to do. And guess what? It wasn't to go cracking down walls, beating those walls down with dynamite. No, he said, I want you to walk around the walls. He says, Joshua, I want you to take the nation and I want you guys to circle the city of Jericho. One time per day for the first 6 days, and then on the seventh day, I want you to circle it 7 times. So the nation of Israel is like, walk around the walls? When was the last time that you were facing a situation and God said, walk around it? You got a popped tire on your car. Walk around your car. Tire fixed. You got to struggle with your bank account. Walk around Chase Bank. Extra zeros. Wouldn't that be great? Got a problem with your health. Walk around the hospital. They've been wandering for 40 years. And God says, walk around the city. Joshua was the only one who knew what would happen at the end. So guess what they do? They walk around the city of Jericho. Cool, Joshua. That's great. Look what we're doing. We're walking around. I don't see any rocks coming down. No, nothing's happening here. All right, Joshua, we've been doing this. We survived 42 years in the desert. Now you want us to walk around a city, and you think that's going to fix things. Walking around this heavily fortified city that needs stuff built to take this place out. Sure, go ahead, I'll do that. This has been a great fun, Josh. But Joshua, we're stuck. Nothing's happening. The walls aren't coming down. It's not working. I've been walking around these walls for 6 days now, and now it's day 7. I'm walking around these walls again. Nothing is taking place. You know, Joshua, this isn't like Tetris, right? Where they slowly come down layer by layer. It's not happening, Joshua. Why are we still walking around these walls? I've been walking around 6 times now. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm stopping. And that's how we live life. We stop on 6. Don't stop on 6. You're supposed to walk around 7 times. 7 times they walked around. Why shouldn't I stop now? I'm not seeing any progress in my marriage. I'm not seeing progress in my health. I'm not seeing progress at school. Nothing's moving. I don't see anything happening. I'm done. I'm over it. I'm not where I want to be. The question is, can you have faith that God is working even when the process seems invisible? We just sang about it a little bit ago. Right? We sang, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. It's really easy to sing a song on Sunday morning without understanding the lyrics that we're actually singing. But when we sing stuff like that, whether it's this song, whether it's another song, if we believe in God and believe in the size that He is, then we better believe the lyrics that we sing. Amen. Worship is more than just singing songs. You have to understand that. So can we believe that God's still working even when we don't see it? Even when it doesn't make sense? Keith and John, can you guys make your way up to help me with this next part? See, progress is something we're all looking for. We want to begin to make progress. We're not where we used to be. We know that. We're not where we want to be, though. But progress isn't always in a straight line. Progress at times can look like a circle. It can look like we're walking around walls. It doesn't make sense. I don't understand it. Why? But see, in our life, there's these gaps that we have. There's the gap of where I want to be and where I used to be. We're going to call this used to be. We're going to call him a has-been. We called John the has-been last service, okay? We'll make it fair. This is where I used to be, and this is where I want to be. And this is where I am. And there's gaps between both of them. And see, this gap right here, the gap between where I am and where I used to be, this is the gap that shows me that God is faithful. This is the gap that shows me, okay, I can trust in God. I believe that He's working. Even when I don't see it, this gap shows me that He's working. But here's the crazy part about the way that God works. Is oftentimes we expect God to work in the ways that seem best to us. And that's not how He works. You see, the nation of Israel, it would have been really easy for them to go from Egypt right up to the promised land where they were at. But God had a different plan because He knew that between Egypt and the promised land were the Philistines. And if He went directly from Egypt to the promised land, they would have had to go through the Philistines. There would have been battles. It would have discouraged the Israelites, and they would have been hurt. They would have lost people. And so He said, no, I got a better way. I'm going to go around. And so they went around the Philistines. See, sometimes in life, we're looking for a straight shot to the next place. We're looking for a straight shot to where we want to be in life. And if God doesn't lead you in the shortest path to your goal, if He doesn't lead you in the shortest path to your dream, if He doesn't lead you in the shortest path to that promise, don't complain or resist. Trust that God is leading you around unforeseen obstacles, because the truth is, God sees the end before you even see the beginning. He sees already the victory that you're going to have before you even realize you're in the middle of a battle. We have to trust God in all of it. And here's the crazy thing about gaps. This is where I used to be, this is where I am, and this is where I want to be. In life, we make progress, right? We make progress. So when I take a step, you step. So we step again, and we step again. I won't push you in that, don't worry. And we look back and we're like, yes, we've made progress. And we look forward and we're like, the gap hasn't changed. What's going on? I don't understand it. I don't get it. I'm moving forward, but nothing's changed. Because you're right where you need to be. You understand that, right? You're not where you used to be. You're not where you want to be. You were right where you need to be. And God is saying to anyone who's in the middle of change, anyone who's in the middle of process, anyone who's in the middle of trial, anyone who's in the middle of a storm, he says, keep stepping, keep walking, stay in my hand, have faith, have courage. I am with you in the middle of the storm. I have got you going. God is with you in the middle. And here's the thing, we need both gaps in our life. We need the gap between where we are and where we used to be. This is the gap that makes us grateful. Because we look back and we say, man, look how far I've come. God, thank you. I'm so grateful for what you've done in my life. And we look forward and we need this gap because this is the gap that makes us grow. The gap that says, hey, I'm not where I want to be, but I can get better. I can grow in my faith. I can grow as an employee. I can grow as a husband, as a parent. I can grow in my health. Whatever it is, I can grow. We need both of these gaps in our life because it's the process, not success, that defines you. We're not living in paradise yet. We're living in process. And so while we're in process, we live in the moment. We enjoy what God is doing. We say, thank you, God, for what you've brought us through. And God, help me to grow because I want to get more like you. Amen. The grateful gap and the growth gap, both of them are important. Just because your progress isn't obvious doesn't mean that God isn't working. Because we stand here right where we are, right where we need to be, and we look back and we say, wow, look at how far I've come. Look at what you've done in my life, God. Thank you so much. And we look here and we say, okay, I may be in the middle of something, but it's not the end. I can still grow. I can still get better. I can still move forward. We need both gaps in our life. The gap that makes us grateful and the gap that makes us grow. Can you thank these guys real quick with me? Thank you guys for your help. After Jesus is resurrected, he's walking on a road with two guys on a road to a town called Emmaus. These two guys are walking along on this town, on this road, and they're having this conversation with Jesus, and they don't even realize it's Jesus. They're discouraged, they're dismayed, they're bummed out. This guy that they'd invested their lives in the last couple of years is now gone. So they're bummed out. They lost their leader, and they didn't even see that Jesus was with them. My question is, are we distracted and not looking at the right things? Are we not looking at the one who's able to help us make a way out? Because you see, the word, Scripture tells us that God is our ever-present help in times of trouble. When we're in the middle of something, when we're stuck, when we're hurting, he's with us in the middle. He is our ever-present, meaning always there, help in times of trouble. Are we missing it because we're looking back? We are so focused on where we were and what's taking place in the past that we don't see where God is taking us, the things that he's leading us into, where we're moving toward. Do you not see it? You're not stuck. You're just in the middle. You're just in process. God promises to never to leave you, never to forsake you. So we can trust in his promises. We have a promise of eternal life with him when we say yes to a relationship with him. See, hope does not guarantee freedom from pain. That means while we're in the middle, pain can happen. It will happen. The hope that we have, it doesn't guarantee us freedom from the pain. We can look at the life of Job. Job in the Old Testament, he is a great example of the suffering and the heartache that comes from that. But it shows the faith that Job had in his life. He lost everything and ended up getting it twice back as much Why? Because he was patient. Job was patient. Sure, there were periods where he doubted and questioned God, but regardless, he was an example of a man who endured difficulty and was rewarded greatly because of the patience that he had. And so we sit here today patiently waiting for Jesus' return. We wait patiently for the glory of where we're meant to be, where we're supposed to be, where we want to be. But we wait patiently, like Job, because when you say yes to a relationship with Jesus, you say yes to also understanding that this place that you're at now is not your permanent home. This is just a temporary home for us that is waiting for the eternal home. Because here's the thing, tomorrow's hope enables us to endure today's hurt. The hope that we have of heaven with Jesus, the hope that we have of eternity with him when we say yes to a relationship with him, it enables us to endure the hurts of today. Waiting on God it takes a lot of faith. And there's some incredible saints in Scripture, some incredible heroes throughout Scripture that are recorded in Hebrews chapter 11. They call it the Hall of Faith, or the Heroes of Faith chapter in Hebrews chapter 11. And when talking about Hebrews chapter 11, or when writing about it, Richard Phillips, he wrote this. He said, "The tapestry of faith unveils generation after generation of God's faithful heroes." He says, "By faith they conquered kingdoms, stopped the mouth of lions, and became mighty in war. They endured torture and stood firm in the face of death." He says, "Together they proved that by faith, a believer has everything he or she needs to triumph against the world's worst opposition." See, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not there yet. I'm not where I used to be. But I'm right where I need to be. I'm in the middle. And guess what? No matter what you're in the middle of, no matter what your past looks like that God has brought you through, no matter what the future you're looking forward to is, whatever middle you're in, God is God in the middle. He is with you in the middle. He promises to walk with you in the middle. He promises to lead you in the middle. He promises to guide you in the middle. He is our ever-present help in the middle. Would you pray with me?